extended control nodes with, what did you call it again, Catherine? I missed the
with the composition script.
With composition script. I'm really looking forward to this one. And we have, it looks like we got a number of people who are joining us today. Hopefully some more will join us. We'll get questions. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. And thanks for joining us on another edition of the Singular how-to group, for lack of a better term, Live with Singular. And I'm going to keep my intro really, really quick because I want to get to this because I have a feeling there's going to be questions, and it does take a little bit longer to do these kinds of webinars when we're talking about JavaScripting. I will set the table by saying we are going to take a look at extending your Singular composition with composition scripts and how you can extend basically control nodes and use JavaScripting to add a whole nother level of functionality. So this demo really is for JavaScripters, aspiring JavaScripters, and also people who maybe don't JavaScript at all, but at least want to be aware of just how powerful it is when you weave JavaScripting into your Singular compositions. As many of you know, I've said this before, I'm not a scripter, but I've learned an incredible amount from our, I like to call him Magical Molden because he does so many great things for Catherine and myself and so many of our users. So that's it for my introduction, because I want to get this over to Thomas's hands and take a look at this sports scoreboard that we're going to dissect with scripting and control nodes. That's it. I'll be quiet, but I do want questions at the end. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Okay, let me share my screen. So you should all see my screen now. I hope it's the right one.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, good. So in this webinar, we're gonna look into this basketball scoreboard composition. It has one composition with a couple of control nodes, and that's what we're gonna look at a bit closer now.
Really quick, Thomas, are you at, I'm a pest about this, but are you at 125 browser zoom or something, just a little bit tighter, so everyone can see a little more zoomed in on the UI?
Okay. Something like that?
Yeah, there we go. A little better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's do that. So this composition has several control nodes down there. There is one control node where we can activate and deactivate the logos, which you see here. Let me scale this a little bit up. And what happens there, these logos are just hidden. And they are hidden by just deactivating then the visibility of the logos itself. What we want to have, of course, then, is we want to have that these names then take over the space which the logos had. So in this case, it means we'll scale up the size a little bit so that they fill up and take over the entire space and then are left justified. So just redo the trims. There is a few more things what we're going to look at here. There's another one, drop down with the possession. And the possession, it has three options. Well, none means we just hide the possession for the left and for the right. It's probably a little bit hard to see. Let me turn off the logo. There is this blue indicator for Philly and the yellow indicator for New York. And you can choose there if you want to show it for team 1 or team 2. Now, of course, nothing happens because we haven't defined the logic yet. Then there is another drop down, which I actually like a lot, because what this shows is that you can use a drop down and modify content there and directly link it to the content. In this case, it's a selection box which allows you to select the half or the quarter which you want to display here in this little bar. The way you do that, it's you define the content which you want to show here in the ID. and it needs to be unique. You need to keep that in mind. The IDs need to be unique. If you have double IDs, then the editor shows an error to remind you to use unique IDs. And then users can select this, and it assigns, in this case, the text field and the content of the text field to this little quarter display, which actually is this one here. So when we change it, you'll see it updating. And that's actually—
So the ID is what is sent to that text property.
The ID is the value which then is sent to the text property. And when you just look at it on the payload structure, then it's displayed as a simple text field, which makes it really easy then to link to text objects. Or if you have various locations, up, down, left, right, you can set specific positions, 0, 1, 2, whatever you like. So, but there is a little
more.
So
that selection, Thomas, that one's not scripted in any way in this.
No, this one is not scripted, and that's why it works also in the composer, because the composer doesn't have the script active. We only have that active on the output and within the composition script editor, of course. So, and then what we see down there is the timeouts. So we have linked the visibility to the timeout groups, and we have drop downs that let you then select the number of timeouts which we see here. We're going to look at that a little later. So let's start with the team logos. When we look here, what do we want to control? We want to control two things. One is we want to control the position, in this case of the possessions, which is this one. So we want to move it a little bit right and further left. If we deactivate or activate the logos, that's one. So it's the position, and it's the position of this group here. And the second thing that we want to modify is then the size of these text widgets. So those are widgets, these are groups. A good resource to dive into Singular composition scripting is the developer portal. When you just go there, have a look at the introduction or look at the cheat sheet, and just search the various options that are available and look at the functions that are explained on the cheat sheet. Like here, we have the find group function, which we're going to use. So it returns the group object. It just needs to define the name of the group. Then we have the find widget function. There are two variants you can use that. The simple version is you'll just define the name of the widget, and then it returns the widget object. The second one is especially useful for our use case. And when you think of the timeouts, which are here, so there are timeouts. The group name is unique. So that's timeout from team 2, team 1 timeouts. But the naming convention, then within this, the widgets within the group, this is the same. So there, what we're going to use when we search for references for that widgets, we use the group name as the first argument and the widget name as the second argument. And this then returns a unique object and reference to this particular widget. So those tools we're going to use. Then we are going to set various properties. So one is we're going to set the size. We're going to set the position, which is here, and we will control the visibility, but then at a later stage. Okay. So far to composition scripting and what we see on the developer portal. Let's jump and open the composition script editor. So I scale this a little bit down, but what I'll do is I increase the size of the font of composition script so you can see that a little bit better. So, so far we don't have a composition script, and we'll add one to the basketball scoreboard. And we'll just start with the boilerplate. Let me remove all things that we don't need. What we'll use here is a callback. That's the payload change callback, because when we click on any of the control nodes here, we'll get the payload changed event triggered within our composition script. Okay, so a question that I've sometimes, actually frequently being asked is, how do you best organize and structure your composition script? Well, that's a good question. What I'll usually do is I'll organize the composition script in 5 parts, which makes it then clearer and a little bit easier to understand. So first we define constants. Then we define the references to widgets, subcompositions, and groups. Then at the next level, I define my custom functions like update the team logo visibility, or update my timeouts, things like that. Then we define the callbacks. And at the end, once we've defined all the functions, we execute those functions to initialize the composition script in a proper way. Okay, so let's move this right up here, because that's the callback that we use. So the first thing, what we said is we're gonna look at the team logos. So what we need is we need the references to the team logo and to the group that contains our possession icon, and I'll add that here. So we name
Sorry,
that.
Thomas, just to clarify, we're talking to the possessions group, as you said, but also the team text name, not the team logos, right? Because
yes, we talk
okay.
about the team names, because the team names, that's what we modify, and from the team names we modify the size. So we increase the size that they start then right from this area.
Okay.
Okay.
Because we've already got that functionality of the logos without the script. So
the visibility is already controlled there. Yeah. So, and that's team 1 name, if I'm not mistaken. And we know that this function returns an array, because you can have multiple widgets with the same name. We strongly recommend using unique names within your composition script. So that's our 2 now. And the next one, what we use is the constant. And I'll start group objects with GR widgets with WI, so to see a little bit right from the variable name what that actually is. Now we find the group, and we'll take 0, and now the group name is team 1 possession. It's team 1 possession, and we copy that team 2, and that's my team 2. So that's actually already pretty good. I often use this just to define the formatting right. So that's the objects that we need. So now what we need is to define the positions, and I did that before. And the way I defined the positions, I'll just copy and paste it in here, is I created a JSON object with the logo positions. So when the logo is on, this is the position for the group, position 1, position 2, X, and that's the size of my text widgets. And below, that's the properties of the size and the X position when the logo is turned off. So yeah, well, we can test that. So one is position, I think was around 8. Was it 8? 7. So this one was 7. So it's here when the logo is on, and it's here when the logo is off. And the size, well, I measured that before. It's 19 when it's on and 26, so it's a bit wider when it's off. Okay, let's define our first function now. So we have a function, and we call that a function is update logo state, because the checkbox, it returns a state. So what this function should do is, depending on the state that's returned, then we activate the logo on properties, or we send the logo off properties. So an easy and way to do that is I can create an if. Let's say that's my position and scale values. I define a variable for that, and then if state is true, because we sent a Boolean to this function, then the pos and scale is the logo positions. And what I'll define here, it's I take the logos on. There we go. And if it's false, I can do that here because there are only 2 options. Then we copy and we take the reference to the logo of values, and by doing that, then I easily just can set the size for the name. Set size, that's X, and this is pos and scale, and we define that here. That's the X scale 1, because that's our name 1, and we do the same for our name 2, which is there. And for the possession, there is somewhere a typo. Here we go. Let's fix that. We set the position X, and the position X is this one here. Pos and scale. There we go. And we do the same for 2. Now we basically have defined our function, and we have to use it. We have to call that function now, and we call that, of course, when the payload changes. We don't need that comment here. And good practice on listeners is that we check that this listener is actually fired from the payload and from the control nodes in this subcomposition. Because when you have nested subcompositions, the events are propagated to the parent until it finds a stop propagation call. If not, then it's always good to use the message object and compare the composition ID which is returned with the composition ID of the composition object which you'll get here on the init. And if that's the same, we know the event is fired from the control nodes on the local composition, and then we can execute it. So now what we want is we want the payload, and we get the payload with the get payload to function, and we can call our function. So the update logo state function. And what we send in there is the, what is it called? What you see here in the fill-in form is the name of the control node. It's the title of the control node. What you need for using with the REST API, also with composition scripting, you need the ID. And the ID is displayed in the payload, which is here. And in this case, it's called logo active. There we go. So we copy and paste this here, save it, and if we made everything right, then we should see the text being scaled, and also the position icon moving properly.
It's not moving. I don't see it.
Doesn't move here. So let me see, maybe what we did. Let's find the group 1. What is it called? It's possession. Do we have a typo? No, that's team 2 possession. That's also okay. Group 1 possession X. Okay, sure. It's a copy and paste error. What I copied and pasted here is the name of the widget. But what I actually need to copy and paste is the name of the property of the value which I have defined here. And that's position 1x. Okay. So let's do that. Okay, and now we saved it, and now this
there we go.
position icon jumps. Okay, so this are some errors that happen from time to time when you copy and paste fast. Sorry for that. Okay.
I'm glad you made that error, Thomas, because when you wrap up and we give you a pause, I just made a list of notes that I think I'm going to touch on to sort of fill in a few of the small little gaps as I see you go through this, but keep going. I don't want to interrupt you, and then I'll go in with some comments.
Okay, so the next one should be quite straightforward, because what we want to do is we want to use this selection box to activate the possession on the left for team 1 or team 2, or to deactivate all of them. And the nice thing is we can use these references to the groups to control it, because we can control the visibility of the groups depending on what we get in return from this callback. And the values which are here, let's have a look at that in the composition itself. There we go. And it's there. It's none. It's team 1 or team 2, all lowercase. So we remember that. So now the next function that we're going to write, it's we update the possession. And what we'll do is we'll take the possession value to do that. So now what we can do is we can define another if. Let's say if possession is equal none. That's the first one. The second one is else if possession equals team 1. And the third one is else if possession equals team 2.
And can you clarify here, Thomas, or just confirm that obviously those aren't the names, that case, like lowercase none, is not what you see in the drop down. You have to go in and check what the ID is. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So when we look at that, so we have the possession, it's set to none. When we look at the payload, the ID is possession lowercase, and it's set to none. When I change it to team 1, so it's uppercase team blank 1, the possession value is set to team 1, and that's what you define in the selection box in the composer.
Yeah. So by default, they're both the same, the ID and the name, at least of the actual control node. So those things can be changed to make your life easier with scripting and make the names more appropriate for the operator. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'll define here is I'll use the set visibility function, which we saw before in the developer portal. And setting the visibility to false is deactivating them. And then down here, I can activate set team 1 to true and team 2 to true. And then, of course, we need to call this function again. Update possession. And what we'll do here is we copy this possession key here, and now save it. I use the shortcut Control S to save the code changes. And now I'll go here and select none, select team 1, then it's here. And we can test it if it works with the logo active. There we go. Yeah, it works. And then with team 2, select it there. So that's all perfect.
Great. That's a simpler one, it seems like, at least for me, to wrap my head around.
Yeah. There is one more thing which we need to do. So what I'll do is I'll just reload the page and just look at the layout we have here at the moment. Well, I deactivate that. So logos are off and team 2 is activated. So when I refresh, now the composition script, what we see, okay, interesting. Yeah, the logo is off, that's right. But the position is wrong, the size is wrong, and both possession icons are active. Why is that? Well, that's easy to explain and to solve. It's the case because we didn't take care of the initial initialization. So when the script is loaded, the entire code is processed. But so far, we only define variables, object references, and functions. We never call them during the initialization. That's where we then just, in this case, make it simple, copy and paste the functions. And of course, we also need to get the payload there to that part where we do the initialization of the script. And now when I reload it, the functions are defined, the constants are declared, and also the script then is executed down here. And when we look here, so now the logos are deactive, possession is none, so everything is working now as it should. Okay, so how we are doing on time? Oh, we are already a bit over time. So let's speed up and let me be a copycat to copy some code, so you don't need to watch me writing it. The next thing what we do is we look into the timeouts, and with the timeouts, what I mentioned before is we have unique group names, and all the widget names that we want to reference, they are basically the same. Timeout 1 to 7 and down they are the same. The way this should work is that depending on the number of timeouts selected, we control the visibility of the timeout widgets, which are here. So what we need to do there is we first define. That's what I actually always like to do is defining functions and data structure that allow me to easily loop through them. And in this case, what we built is we built two arrays with timeout elements. And in this timeout elements, what we put in there is we push from 1 to 7, because we have 7 timeout elements here, all the widget references from the group timeout, team 1 timeouts and timeout. There we add then the index. So we dynamically build the name of the timeout widgets and push that into this timeout arrays. So in this way, we have an array with all the elements. And in the second step, what we can do is we define a function that takes this one of these timeout arrays, and it takes the number of timeout which is here, and then just controls the visibility. So that's actually a very, very short function. And I'll just copy and paste it down here. So the function is called update timeouts. It takes the timeout elements as an array and the number of timeouts which are selected here. And then there is a basic error checking. So we just check if the timeout elements exist and if the length is bigger than 0. So in case we made an error and we have an empty array, so we don't want to loop through that. So that's what we are checking here. And then we use the for each function to cycle through all these timeout elements and set the visibility depending if the index is bigger than the number of timeouts. So if it's bigger than the number of timeouts, we set it true. If not, then we set it to false, and we define the visibility then basically here. So now let's call this, and we actually have to call this this function twice. One, that's the team 1 timeouts, and the second one parameter is the number of timeouts we get in return from the control nodes. So I copy and paste that here. So that's the team 1 timeouts, and I'll copy and paste that again for team 2. I think that's an easy way to manage that. And also for the initialization, I'll just need this to copy and paste that here. I'll use the beautifier. That's the button I use most here in the composition script editor. And now with this active, when I change the number of timeouts, right, I'll see it updating right away up here.
I'm glad you pointed out the beautifier too, because that's a very, very handy tool. I use it constantly, yeah, just like you do. It's great.
Okay, so
should we cover the last one? I don't know if you guys want to go into this, but I find it I use it frequently. Script to be able to use the checkbox to turn on or off a subcomp. So activate play in
Yeah,
or out
Yeah,
a
you
subcomp.
refer to this one. Yeah, what does this,
Yes.
this actually do? So let me just make this a little bit smaller again. So what we have here, and we see that in the structure down there, we have a subcomposition. It's hidden here. That's called foul. And this subcomposition, it just shows a flag, which is here, and then it animates it off again. What we want is we want to use this checkbox to activate it and to deactivate it. How do we do that? So we add another function.
And remember, this is going to be to play the graphic in or out, because by default, without scripting, you could just affect the visibility of that element, but that's not as elegant as actually playing in a graphic. The animation of your choosing, it would just flip on and off. So this is to kind of make it prettier.
Okay, so what we'll do is, yeah, we get one, let's say is active. There we go. So what should this function do? First, what we need is we need a reference to that subcomposition. We'll define that here. So we have comp, and we call that's foul, and that's comp.find. And again, we take the first element, and the subcomposition is called foul. Now that's what we have here. Now, in the function itself, what we'll do is we control the animation. And the animation has two states. It has the out state, as we see here, and it has the in state. So what we define, that's something what I really like in a similar way to use this tentative operator, which allows me to define an if statement in a single line. That's the to state. That's what I define, and that's the animation state where we want to animate the subcomposition to. Depends on the is active flag. If it is active, then the state is in, and if it's not active, then the state is out. There we go. And then what I need to do is I use the comp foul, and we play to that to state. There we go. And at the end, we have to call this function.
Mm-hmm.
And we call it, let's say, down here. I forgot the semicolons there. But JavaScript interpreter, meanwhile, it doesn't bother anymore. It does that automatically. And what we do here, it's the payload, and the checkbox is called, that's a long name, foul indicator active. So there we go. So now, yeah, we saved the composition script, and during the save process, the composition script is loaded and executed. But we see that the foul indicator is active, but we don't see it. And we don't see it because we don't call the function in the initialization. So now it's there, and I save it. And what we should see is the foul indicator is moving up. And now I can activate it and deactivate it using this checkbox. And of course, it's animating off and on with the parent composition. And that's because we have added an animation to this group. So this helps. If we wouldn't have done that, there is an option to manage that in the composition script, but this would exceed the time which we currently have. I can point out the function in the in the portal, and that's the function which is called the timeline event listener. Because the timeline event listener, it returns a callback on the start and the end of an animation, and you can use that then to trigger the animation of sub-compositions or sub-sub-compositions. Let's go back to that.
One really quick thing, Thomas, when you're talking to a subcomp in the script, is it always the case that you're not going to want that timeline linked? Because by default, in Composer, when you add a new subcomp, it links the timeline to its parent animation. And if you do that, you've got two different aspects of it competing with the animation state. Is that correct?
Well, if you link it within the Composer, what happens is then you don't have control, individual control of that sub-composition animation anymore. Because you see now, though, the control buttons, they disappeared. You only can control that when you unlink it. So you have individual control over the animation state of this sub-composition.
That's a really good piece to point out too. I have one question that just popped up. Is there a way that we could play? Yes, thank you, Catherine. I'm just going to respond. Thomas, I'm going to drop in some context to this, and that is some comments and some context. So I've built many Singular compositions with Thomas, as has Catherine, some quite advanced with a lot of scripting. What he's done here today is focused in on one sub-composition script. So Thomas, if you wouldn't mind, just go over to the composition script for me. So he doesn't have a global script, he doesn't have a root script, he just has a sub-comp script. Everything is happening within that sub-comp script. So that's one thing of note, and you can see it right there. Another piece to remember is if you jump back over to the composition, Thomas, note that Thomas has built the composition in using camel case almost throughout, almost entirely, I believe almost entirely. And that's a really key point. You don't have to build in camel case, but camel case sure as heck makes it a heck of a lot easier to troubleshoot things. I'll also make a comment on the naming convention.
The naming of the widgets, right?
The naming of the widgets and the naming of the groups too, both. Yes. I mean, there are times where you want to break from that at the root level of the composition, the actual, I'll call it the root subcomp of a composition. You probably don't want those to be called in camel case, because that's what our control applications, whether it's Uno or Studio, are going to be reading that. So you want that to be more human legible. But the camel case is really helpful because it just eliminates a lot of typos and errors, which is usually one of the most common places where you make mistakes is in a typo.
Yeah, definitely.
And one more comment, Tom, and if you just take any one of the control IDs and click on the properties of a control node, you see where we have the ID and the title. We brushed on this earlier. I find it much easier when you start off is name them both camel case right out of the gate. And then when you're done, go back and change your title to something that's human legible, because again, the title is what's going to be displayed in either Uno or Studio in R2 control apps. It's just
for your operators.
I trip Thomas up a lot sometimes when I right out of the gate make those two, because sometimes they end up being entirely different. I mean, for a whole host of reasons, they don't. The naming convention, not only the name, the camel case name does not match the title name when you're all done with your composition for a whole variety of reasons. So I suggest that when you start is make the ID and the title the exact same, because it eliminates errors you're going to have in the composition script. Thomas, one more thing, jump over to the composition script. When Thomas says reload, there's a difference between reloading the page, this entire Chrome page, and refreshing. The refreshing the composition is, you'll find when you get more composition or more complicated compositions, there's this interplay back and forth between, oh, I made a mistake in the composition. Maybe it was a naming convention. Maybe you wanted to add something. You need to reload the composition into the composition script. So if you, for example, noted that maybe you made a typo in your composition, in your naming convention, and something's not working in the script, you need to jump over to the composition, save that name back over to the comp script and hit reload. So you're reloading. What's functionally happening when you hit that reload button is you're actually loading the JSON, the composition, which is a JSON file, into the composition script. So there's this back and forth, a lot of back and forth. Thomas didn't need to show you back and forth between composition editing and the composition script because it wasn't really the purpose of this demo, but I just wanted to make you aware that button that he just clicked, what that just did is it reloaded the composition into the composition script editor. Thomas showed you the Beautify, which is a phenomenal tool up at the upper top of the menu bar where he beautifies the JSON, or let's just say the JavaScript itself, which is very, very handy. And my other notes was, and he showed you refreshing the page where the initialization piece was important, where he hadn't added the initialization. He got no error. There was no error in the script, but it wasn't being initialized at the end of the JSON script. And I think, and the last piece I will say is,
sorry, go ahead.
When you reach a sort of milestone, you get a bit or a piece of this functional. You've got your composition working, your script is working, you're seeing it working in the composition script. What you're going to want to do is jump back over to the composition. Thomas, if you wouldn't mind just doing that, and go to your revisions and give that a name. Make sure to drop in, like save your state and call it something meaningful, like logo script functional working, or something that you remember before you move on to the next piece of the scripting. Because what you'll find is sometimes you'll just get maybe a little overwhelmed in the script. You add 2 or 3 functions at one time, which I do. I'll take something Thomas has given me, expand on it, and go, oh my gosh, I can't figure. So I might just do it on a function by function basis, or maybe I'm just adding one more widget, a group with some few widgets. Is everything working? Yes, I can always roll back. So that revisions piece is immensely helpful, because again, if you get tripped up, all you have to do is reload the revision, go back over to the composition script, reload the comp into the script, and you're off and running. There's a little, I've had a few users over the years have said, oh, I know it's confusing, this back and forth between the composition and the composition script. It's honestly not that bad once you get, once you use this, I'll call it bits and piece method, which is to say, get something working, save it as a revision, then move on to the next piece, because you kind of build and build. And the back and forth is honestly, it's not too bad. It's sort of repetitive motions of beautify, save, reload, go back to composition. And you do quite a bit of that. It's not like you build a composition perfectly, everything's great. You go to the composition script, add the composition, everything works. You're going to be doing a lot of back and forth. That's why revisions are powerful and not powerful, essential. You really have to save revisions, because you'll get tripped up. Oh, I did all this work, I don't remember where I am. So I think those were all my notes. The IDs, refresh, reload, save, beautify, camel case were sort of my pieces. Again, this is just a reminder, this is one sub composition script. There's a whole nother level of incredible, powerful, scripting where you get into root composition script, where maybe you have an array of data that you're calling on and bringing into subcomps. We're not going to cover that today, but this demo will be made available. This composition will be made available, as Catherine mentioned in the chat. So this is a great example, really powerful. And I'm going to look here if anybody else, I see any more.
I did just answer a question about a way to create these compositions without having much knowledge in this particular topic. I mean, you can create, absolutely, but the extended features that we covered today, there's no other way to do it without scripting. That's why we covered it. You can set up multiple different control nodes and try and do a bunch of different stuff at once. But as you guys have probably run into, it's very limited. You can talk to generally one widget property at a time. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, Stephen, but there are several limitations if you want to do.
Yeah, basic building, building a composition minus a composition script can take you a long way, and you can really get creative and find some things. What you will find is you'll have to do in some cases a lot of duplication, replication, meaning you'll have a lower third, 2 lower thirds, and 3 lower thirds that are really essentially the same thing minus a little bit of logic. That is why at some point you have that breaking point. And I can completely understand anybody who's watching this. Oh, JavaScripting, I don't know how to JavaScript. I mean, I didn't know how to JavaScript. And you just baby steps, bits and pieces, small examples. And I think, again, the feedback, little bits and pieces, bite-sized pieces of just one subcom, a little bit of scripting, one function, and then move on to the next piece. So hopefully this covered, well, I think, Thomas, you added, if I'm not mistaken, 3 functions, and which is a good amount. I would challenge anybody who's not a JavaScripter or maybe has basic understanding of scripting is really try to go through and rebuild what Thomas just did, and you'll be amazed at how much you learn. I mean, essentially what he's doing, or what he covered, is he's talking directly to the composition tree. He's talking directly to properties directly in the tree. So now you have this in your mind. You have to know sometimes, and in this composition, we have control nodes talking directly to properties, no script involved. Then on top of that, because of the script, we have control nodes talking directly to the tree via the script. So you have to start small pieces and then build and build. And I think this is a phenomenal hat tip, Catherine, for this example, and Thomas, yourself, for breaking it down bit by bit. And your logic in the beginning, that sort of 5-step method, is great. It is a best practice. It really is. So and
hopefully you guys got something out of it. If you're not doing sports type productions, you could probably imagine different scenarios of showing, I don't know, a network logo or something, and having to move elements of your graphic over to accommodate that logo positioning, hiding and showing elements. There's a lot that you can do with the sort of examples that we've laid out here. So hopefully you can apply it to your own projects.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to point out. It's the developer portal on composition scripting, and also on use cases where we add use cases as they are requested. We have a bunch of them on the backlog. Haven't had the time to add them. One of the most recent ones is this one. It's the ticker widget, or the text ticker. The text ticker is built in a way that when you animate it in, it runs. When you animate it out, it stops at the specific point, and when you reanimate it in again, it just continues. And a frequently asked question is, how can I restart the ticker every time on the in animation? And this use case explains in detail, well, the functions that are covered there, how you need to build the script, and then you just copy and paste this script into the composition script editor, and then you're ready to go. There is a controller that you can use to test it. Well, that's a ticker message which is there, so I can animate it off, and when I animate it in again, it starts from the beginning. When I just send a new ticker message, then this one is added at the end of that one which is just running. So that's new ticker message. If I animate it off and animate it on again, it starts right from the beginning. And well, if you have a use case that you would like us to cover, feel free to send us, to drop us a line, and we are more than happy to create that and share the composition with you if it's a very specific one, or publish it on our developer portal.
We've got a couple more questions here.
Yeah, a couple of questions. The first one from William. Appreciate the kind words about the building, a great way to building, creating a great way to make basic graphics and no coding. Singular is extremely powerful if you're willing to get into it. Only thing I could suggest is maybe a way to do block coding instead of having to type it all. Maybe that will reduce syntax errors. Yes. And then there's a question, Thomas, I think you can answer this one. Conf find widget function returns an array. That's why we have to use 0, even if we only have one widget with the same name.
Yeah,
For
yes,
example, I've
this is
created.
yes, this
No,
is
it's
right.
yes, it's different.
The find subcompositions, find widget, find group calls, they return an array because the names of widgets or groups, they are not unique. Operators can enter multiple widgets of the same name. So that's why it returns an array, even if there is only a single occurrence of that name there. What you could do if you don't want to use that function, you can write a global script function, which we actually have, and we provide that library. It's then a get widget function, and this get widget function then always returns the first occurrence of that specific widget object.
Yeah. I think we've run out of time.
Double time.
Perhaps. Double time, which I always expect these more advanced ones to go a little bit longer, which is totally fine. We had some good questions. And we will, dip our toe into the water a little bit deeper on another ones. We'll come back to scripting, I'm sure, down the road with other examples, maybe from a user, maybe from one of the many projects that we get involved with as a team. So thanks everybody for watching. I don't think I have anything else. Catherine, anything from you?
No,
Thomas?
just that keep an eye out for our email. We're going to make sure you guys have access to this template so you can reverse engineer it and study it. And yeah.
Thank you. A lot of thanks from a lot of thanks from a number of users. Really appreciate it. We really enjoy doing these, and we will be back again sooner than later. So thanks again for watching. Catherine, thanks for setting us up. Thomas, as usual, great stuff.
Thanks
Appreciate
very
it.
much for having me here. And it was a good, I think, a productive webinar.
Yep.
Always good.
All right, guys, take care. See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
See you. Bye.